Claressa Shields just did something that no champion in modern boxing has ever been bold enough, or maybe desperate enough, to do. She posted her own numbers. She published them herself, proudly, publicly, like a receipt that was supposed to silence every critic on earth. And within hours, the entire internet did the one thing she never planned for. The entire internet started doing the math. And the math, depending on who you ask tonight, either cements Claressa Shields as the most powerful woman combat sports has ever produced, or it quietly exposes the most carefully constructed illusion in the entire boxing business. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand why an $8 million question is hanging over the champ's head right now, why a rapper's forward intro just turned into a full-blown investigation, and why a completely different woman on a completely different card on a September night might be holding the pen that writes the ending of Claressa Shields' financial story. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear about what this video is and what it is not. This is not a hit piece. Claressa Shields is, by any honest measurement, one of the greatest fighters to ever wrap her hands. Multiple divisions, Olympic pedigree, a resume that most Hall of Famers would trade years of their life for. Nobody is taking that away from her, and nobody should. But greatness inside the ropes and power outside the ropes are two completely different conversations. And this week, Claressa Shields walked directly into the second conversation by her own choice, carrying a graphic full of numbers. So we are going to do what this channel always does. We are going to slow everything down, lay every piece on the table, and figure out what is actually happening here, because what is actually happening here is so much bigger than one fighter and one post. Let's start with the post itself. After her most recent fight, Claressa Shields took to social media and shared what was framed as a statement of dominance. Tens of millions of impressions, combined reach across platforms, a total impact number designed very clearly to say one thing: the champ moves the needle. And on the surface, if you just scroll past it, it works. It looks massive. It looks historic. It looks like the kind of figure that ends arguments. But here is where it gets interesting, and here is where you have to pay very close attention, because the detail that changes everything is not in the number. It is in how the number was built. What Claressa Shields posted was not a viewership figure. It was not a gate figure. It was not, and this is the part that matters more than anything else in this entire story, a pay-per-view figure. What the champ posted was a combined total. Facebook, Instagram, every platform, every impression, every scroll past, every autoplay, stacked on top of each other into one giant headline number. And look, that is a real marketing metric. Agencies use it. Brands use it. It is not fake. But it is also not the metric that decides what a fighter is worth, and deep down, everybody in the business knows it, including, I would argue, Claressa Shields herself. Because here is the context that turns this from a victory lap into a very uncomfortable comparison. When Jake Paul fought Mike Tyson, that event generated a reported 1.4 billion impressions across social platforms. Billion with a B. An event built around a retired legend and a YouTuber, a fight that purists said was a circus, did numbers that make the champ's combined total look like a regional promotion. And when Terence Crawford and Canelo Alvarez finally shared a ring, the viewership conversation around that fight lived in the tens of millions of real, measurable, actual viewers. Not impressions. Not scroll bias. Viewers. Human beings who chose to watch. That is the difference between reach and gravity. Reach is how many timelines you appeared on. Gravity is how many people stopped their night for you. And when you line Claressa Shields up against her true peers in the attention economy, not her peers in the ring, her peers in the business, the number she posted tells a very different story than the one she intended. And this is the moment where the whole situation flips from a marketing story into a business emergency, because of one figure that has been floating around the sport for a while now. $8 million. That is the number attached to Claressa Shields. That is the tier the champ has been fighting to be paid in, to be respected in, to be marketed in. And $8 million is not a compliment. $8 million is a bet. When someone pays a fighter at that level, they are not paying for what happened last fight. They are paying for what they believe the next fight will return. Which means every single number Claressa Shields publishes from now on is not a brag. It is an audition. And you do not audition for $8 million with combined impressions. You audition with pay-per-view buys, with gate revenue, with subscription conversions. So the question the entire industry is quietly asking tonight is brutally simple. If the numbers do not lie, why won't anybody drop the real numbers? Drop the pay-per-view figures. Drop the revenue. Drop the actual dollars. That is what the critics are saying, and honestly, it is the fairest question in combat sports right now. Because the one number that would end every debate about Claressa Shields drawing power forever is the one number that never seems to make it into the graphic. And until it does, every combined impressions post is going to be read, fairly or unfairly, as a magician asking you to look at this hand so you do not watch the other one. And let me paint the picture of how fast this spread, because the speed is part of the story. The post went up, and for the first hour, it did exactly what it was designed to do. The fans celebrated. The supporters reposted. The headline number traveled. But then the second wave hit, and the second wave was the auditors. The accounts that exist for no other reason than to take apart graphics like this one. And they started pulling the comparison footage, the Jake Paul figures, the Crawford and Canelo viewership reports, and they started laying them side by side with the champs post like exhibits at a trial. And once that framing locked in, there was no getting the narrative back. That is the thing about publishing your own numbers. You are not ending the debate. You are scheduling it. You are handing the internet a document and saying, "Here, check my work." And the internet always checks the work. Claressa Shields walked into the audit voluntarily, and that is the detail I cannot stop thinking about because it tells you one of two things. Either the champ genuinely believes these numbers are unimpeachable, which means her camp is reading the business wrong. Or the champ felt pressure to post something, anything, to control a conversation that was already slipping away. And both of those possibilities are more fascinating than the post itself. But the numbers post is only half of this story, and honestly, it might be the smaller half. Because at the exact same time the champ was publishing her reach, her other half was stepping up to a microphone and creating a completely different kind of headline. Papoose, the veteran lyricist, the man who has spent the last stretch of his career repositioning himself from artist to mogul, opened his latest moment on wax with 4 words that have now been replayed, clipped, memed, and autopsied across the entire culture. I am an executive. That is how he started it. Not a metaphor, not a double entendre, a job title. And the reaction was instant, and it was brutal because the follow-up question wrote itself in about 1 million comment sections at once. An executive of what, exactly? Now, to be fair to Papoose, the man does hold a real position. The title attached to his name is an executive role at a record label, and on paper that is a legitimate thing. Plenty of artists have crossed over into the boardroom and thrived. But the problem with declaring yourself an executive on the first bar of a song is that the moment you say it, people stop listening to the song and start auditing the resume. And the audit, in this case, has been ruthless. Where is the label's roster? Where are the other artists' rollouts? Where are the albums from the young talent that the label was supposed to be built around? If you are the executive of music, the culture is asking, then where is the music? Because from the outside looking in, the loudest voice coming out of that executive office has been the executive himself. Rapping. And that is not how the executive class is supposed to move. The whole point of being the man behind the desk is that other people's careers become your loudest statement. When your own voice is the only product on the shelf, the title starts to sound less like a position and more like a costume. And it gets worse because this was not an isolated moment. This was a pattern. There was the performance up in Canada that is now living a second life online for all the wrong reasons, a crowd that never quite locked in, a call and response that never quite got its response, and a moment on that stage where Papoose, reading a room that was not giving him the energy he needed, asked the audience how many of them were getting money. And that right there, whether he meant it this way or not, was a veteran move. Because watch what that question actually does. If the crowd says they are getting money, then any disconnect can be blamed on them not understanding the struggle in the music. And if the crowd says they are not getting money, then the disconnect can be blamed on them not being able to relate to the wealth in the music. Either way, the flop has an alibi built in before anybody even writes the review. That is the kind of question you ask when you already know you are going to be asked about the performance later. It is a parachute stitched mid-fall. And then there is the car moment. The freestyle in the vehicle, the casual setting, the kind of setting that is supposed to make a lyricist look effortless. And sitting right there was Remy Ma, his partner, a woman who has forgotten more about rap than most of the industry will ever know. And when the moment called for her to echo the line, the words that came out were not the words on the record. She fumbled the lyric. She fumbled her own household song. And the internet, being the internet, froze that frame and asked the coldest question possible. If your own side cannot recite the record, who exactly is the record for? Because think about how the business of music actually works. There are radio commercials, 30-second jingles selling insurance, that entire cities can sing word for word. Songs become inescapable through repetition and impact. And here was a track, pushed by an executive, riding in the car with its own inner circle, and the inner circle could not catch the hook. That is not a music problem anymore. That is a market signal. That is the universe telling you, in real time, how far the product has actually traveled. Now, why does any of this belong in a video about Claressa Shields and her numbers? Because they are the same story. They are the exact same story wearing two different outfits. One is a fighter presenting combined impressions as proof of drawing power. The other is a rapper presenting a job title as proof of business power. Both are real things being stretched to cover a much larger claim. And both, crucially, are happening in the same household at the same time, which means the Shields brand right now is running a two-front war on perception. And perception, in the pay-per-view economy, is not soft. Perception is pricing. Which brings us to the third layer of this story, the layer almost nobody covering this has bothered to give proper credit, and it might be the most important one. The platform. Because that recent fight did not happen in a vacuum. It happened on Zeus Network, and if you understand what Zeus actually is, you understand that the attention around that event was not generated the way boxing attention is normally generated. Zeus is not a sports platform that dabbles in chaos. Zeus is a chaos platform that has learned to monetize attention better than almost anybody in the streaming era. Zeus built its entire empire on reality television warfare, on personalities who bring their own audiences, their own feuds, their own gravity. When an event lands on Zeus, it does not just get a broadcast. It gets injected into an ecosystem of viewers who are already there, already invested, already watching whatever comes next. The pre-fight programming, the personalities, the drama machines, that is the engine. So when Claressa Shields posts a giant combined number and plants the Zeus figures quietly at the bottom of the graphic, the fair reading, the honest reading, is that a serious share of that attention was rented, not owned. Zeus was the hook. Zeus was the magnet. The champ was the main event of a show that a whole lot of people were already watching for reasons that had nothing to do with championship boxing. And I need to be precise here because this is not an insult. Renting attention is smart. Every smart fighter in history has done it. Floyd Mayweather rented the attention of the wrestling world, the reality TV world, the celebrity world, and converted it into generational wealth. There is no shame in borrowing a bigger stage. The danger only appears when you start confusing the stage's audience with your audience. Because the stage's audience leaves when you leave. Your audience follows you anywhere. And the only way to know which is with the one metric Claressa Shields has not posted. The number of people who paid specifically for her. And this is exactly where the story takes its sharpest turn. Because while the champ is defending her numbers on one front, a completely different variable is loading up on the calendar. And her name is Chrisean Rock. Now, if you have followed any of this, you know the backstory. Chrisean Rock, reality television's most volatile superstar, Blueface other half. A woman who has never thrown a professional punch in her life, has been circling the boxing world. And the build-up, the back and forth, the will they won't they around her and Blueface, has been generating the kind of organic, unstoppable, can't-look-away attention that promoters would sacrifice years of their lives to manufacture. There is an old saying in show business that there is no such thing as bad publicity, and whether you love that saying or hate it, Chrisean Rock is its living proof. Every argument, every headline, every clip of chaos is a brick in the road, leading to a September fight night that is now circled on every gossip page and every betting forum in the culture. And here is the part that should genuinely concern the Shields camp, because this is where the $8 million question comes roaring back. When Chrisean Rock steps into that ring in September, the numbers that event does will not be combined impressions. They will be visible. They will be trackable. The whole world will be able to see in real time what a reality television superstar with zero boxing pedigree can pull. And if Chrisean Rock pulls anything close to the kind of attention Claressa Shields just posted, if she doubles it, if she even approaches it, then the entire pricing structure of women's boxing gets dragged into a boardroom and renegotiated on the spot. Because some promoter somewhere is going to look at a spreadsheet and ask the question that changes everything. Why would we pay $8 million for the champ when we can pay a fraction of that for the chaos, and the chaos pulls the same crowd? That is not a fair question. It is not a respectful question. It ignores everything Claressa Shields has earned. But it is the exact question that gets asked in every negotiation in this business, and September is going to hand somebody the data to ask it loudly. And now, with that context, go back and look at something that seemed strange at the time, because it was noted, and not kindly, that Claressa Shields had words about Chrisean Rock and Blueface. Words to the effect of telling Rock to keep her distance from a certain somebody. And at the time, people read it as personal. People read it as messy. But look at it again through a business lens, and it reads completely differently. If you are the champ and you understand, consciously or not, that the Chrisean Rock and Blueface saga is a publicity engine that directly inflates the value of the September card, then anything that cools that saga down protects your position. Every bit of heat between Rock and Blueface is a deposit in the September pay-per-view. And the bigger September gets, the more uncomfortable the comparison gets for everybody at the $8 million tier. Suddenly, that warning does not read like jealousy. It reads like market defense. It reads like someone who understands, at a level most fighters never have to, that in the modern fight game, your real opponent is not in the other corner. Your real opponent is on the spreadsheet. Now, if you are wondering whether a crossover fight can really move real money, you have not been paying attention to the last 5 years of this business. The Paul brothers turned novelty into stadiums. Reality personalities have headlined cards that outdrew legitimate champions. The market has already told us, over and over, that curiosity outsells pedigree when the lights come on. That is not my opinion. That is the receipts. So when people laugh off the September card as a sideshow, they are laughing at a force that has already eaten a slice of this sport once and is coming back for seconds. Claressa Shields is not competing with Chrisean Rock for respect. Respect was never on the table. Claressa Shields is competing with Chrisean Rock for the one resource neither of them can manufacture, and that is the casual viewer's dollar. The casual viewer does not know a jab from a cross. The casual viewer knows what is trending. And trending right now is the currency that sets purses. So where does this all land? Where does the greatest female fighter of her generation go from a week where she posted her own numbers and the internet responded by grading them? Here is what I actually believe, and I do not say this lightly. I believe Claressa Shields is one win away from flipping this entire narrative, but it is a different kind of win than she has ever had to chase. It is not a win over an opponent. It is a win over the metric. Because the path out of this is so simple it is almost elegant. Fight somebody the culture actually wants to see. Put the event on a stage built for boxing, not borrowed from a reality show. And then, when it is over, drop the real numbers. Not the combined impressions. Not the reach, the buys, the gate, the dollars. If those numbers are strong, every single criticism in this video dies in one night. Every meme, every audit, every $8 million doubt gone. That is the power of one honest number. And if those numbers are not strong, then no combined graphic in the world was ever going to save the story anyway. And it is better to know now while there is still time to rebuild the strategy around truth instead of spin. And for what it is worth, the champ has survived worse. This is a woman who came from circumstances that would have broken most people before they ever saw a ring, who fought for legitimacy in a sport that did not want to give her any, who has been counted out, lowballed, and disrespected at nearly every stage of her career, and who has answered every single time with her fists. There is no reason to believe this chapter ends differently. But this chapter is different because this opponent does not have a chin. You cannot knock out a narrative. You can only outgrow it. And do not forget the deeper irony sitting underneath all of this. For years, the criticism of Claressa Shields was that the business did not value her, that the networks did not push her, that the sport did not pay her what her resume demanded. And that criticism was valid. But the answer to being undervalued was never to overstate the value. The answer was to prove it in the one currency nobody can argue with. And that is what makes this week such a strange inflection point. The champ finally stepped into the numbers conversation she has been demanding for years, and she stepped in with the softest numbers available. It is like demanding a heavyweight title shot and then pointing at your amateur trophy case. The demand was right. The evidence was wrong. And the entire sport is now waiting to see which one she brings to the next negotiation. As for Papoose, the executive conversation is not over either. Because titles in this culture are not granted by announcements. They are granted by outcomes. Jay-Z did not become a billionaire by saying he was one on the intro. The proof came from the artists he broke, the companies he built, the moves that showed up in other people's bank accounts. If the label Papoose represents starts producing stars, starts shipping albums, starts turning that young roster into names the culture chants, then those 4 words age into prophecy. And if it does not, they age into a meme. The music will decide. It always does. And that right there is the real story of this entire week. Not a fighter posting numbers. Not a rapper claiming a title. It is the collision of 2 people in one household in the same 7 days, both trying to tell the world what they are worth, and the world responding in unison with the same 3 words. Show us, then. That is the era we live in now. The audience is no longer the audience. The audience is the auditor. Every claim gets a fact check. Every graphic gets a re-ad. Every title gets a resume review. And the stars who thrive in this era will not be the ones who shout their value the loudest. They will be the ones who understand that in the attention economy, the only number that has ever mattered is the one you did not have to post yourself, because everybody else was already posting it for you. So now I want to hear from you, and I mean that because this one is going to split the room. Should Claressa Shields release the real pay-per-view numbers and end this debate forever? Or does the champ owe the internet absolutely nothing? Does the Chrisean Rock fight in September genuinely threaten the pay structure of women's boxing? Or are we comparing a sport to a sideshow that can never truly touch it? And be honest with me on this one. Did Papoose's executive intro deserve the audit it got? Or did the culture move the goalposts on a veteran who actually holds the title? Get in the comments, because the best conversation on the internet about this is going to happen right under this video. And if you made it all the way to this point, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, because next week we are breaking down the September card in full, the money, the matchups, and the one number from that night that is going to decide more careers than any punch thrown in the ring. You are not going to want to miss what the math says. Trust me on that one.